welcome to the first episode of the Cage Sessions. I got with me the Ultimate Fighter Season 31 champion, Kurt the Hurt Holobaugh. How's it going, Kurt?
Man, it's going good. Living life, man. Just living life.
How was it being on the Ultimate Fighter? Once again, I just want to say congratulations on winning the season in the lightweight division. How was the experience of being on the show?
It was a great experience. Different than probably anything I've ever faced before. Just being away from home, being locked in a big house with, basically an all-you-can-eat buffet because they feed you anything you want. You have a list. You just write down anything you want to eat. Now you got to cook it yourself, but man, that's like, and the way I best describe it to everybody is it's a fighter's paradise. If you want to be a UFC fighter and you want to, go to the top, that's something that you want to do.
I'm going to deep dive into season 31, but before I do that, what was your introduction into MMA and just going into the sport? Because not a lot of people know how you got started.
So just from being a small kid, if it was anything to do with fighting, I was entertained by it. Whether it was Steven Seagal, Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, whether it's, Mike Tyson, boxing, Evander Holyfield, I was just very intrigued by that. So I knew right then and there that, I used to say I want to be a boxer when I was that age, just because of Mike Tyson and Holyfield. And then when the UFC started coming around, I started watching the UFC a lot and really getting into it. And, I went to high school with a couple of guys that started cage fighting in about 2004 after we graduated. And I'm like, man, if they can do it, I can do it. So, I was working one day and I seen a gym, Gracie Baja Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And, I went and talked to the owner, which is my coach still to today, Rafael Elwanger.
Yeah, I like your style because it's not only can you stand up and trade, but you also have that jiu-jitsu style. We saw that in the finals where you were able to overcome a little bit of adversity and then lock in that submission. So you're a little bit of a two-getter with that. Like you see a lot of people now, it's all about the MMA part. Like in the beginning, I would say of the UFC, it was all a lot of guys that either could stand up and trade or guys that are very submission specialist, but now you got a best of both worlds. And how have you been able to adapt to that? We've seen like in your last 6 or 7 fights, you've had like 3 finishes via submission and then 3 via KO.
Yeah, it's just I like to train a little bit of everything. Of course, I feel like my background is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but every time I'm training for a fight, I'm training a little bit of everything. I've been training for almost 17 years now. And, and I've never only been training one aspect of martial arts. Since day one, I went to a jiu-jitsu class. The very next class was an MMA class. And I just kept it rolling from there, doing a little bit of everything.
And you've had like an unusual path to make it back to the UFC because you went 9-0 record to start your regional career. Then you had the weird path of going to Strikeforce for one fight, and then they folded and got bought out by the UFC. And then you had your contract honored by them. You did one fight, but then went back to the regional scene, did very well, and then came back up. You even had a hard schedule for those 3 fights in the UFC against names that are very synonymous in that division. And then you go up and you do 3 more regional scene fights, and you're in that tournament. And what was it? Did that regional scene fold? And then you went to the Ultimate Fighter, or what happened there? Because I knew you were supposed to do the finals, but then the next thing we know, you're in the Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah. So whenever I signed that Strikeforce deal, that was actually a UFC deal because UFC had actually already bought them. So when I signed with them, my manager they said, "Hey, bud, so this is the deal. You step up and take this fight against Pat Healy. The UFC is probably going to take you because you're signing a UFC contract. And, normally the UFC don't cut you after one loss. Normally they'll let you get 2 or 3 before they cut you. But I put on a good performance, so they wanted to keep me around. Sean Shelby even came to the bag, told me he was going to bring me to the UFC, and I'm like, all right, cool. But yeah, I drop a couple fights, get released, go back on the local circuit, win some fights. I signed with Titan FC where I won, you
Yeah.
know, two world championships in the lightweight division and the featherweight division over some really highly talented guys who have fought all around the world, and Desmond Green and Jay-Z Cavalcanti. And then, I got that call to headline the very first contender series, the Dana White contender series. And I ended up winning my contract or my next contract on the contender series, and went back to the UFC. But like you said, man, just I was fighting probably some of the best guys in the division. All three guys that I fought and lost to, which all three were pretty close fights. Fight of the night in one, dropping the guy in the other, just being a little reckless, and getting caught in the sub, and then just Thiago Moises fighting him in Brazil in his hometown. I mean, I think that put a little bit of pressure on me. But I lost all those fights. All those guys were ranked top 10, top 15 after fighting me, and, going on a little streak there. And yeah, I got a release from the UFC again, and this is right around the COVID era. So, there was a lot going on in the world at that time. And finally, my manager hit me up and he said, hey, man, look, they got the XFC coming. They're going to be on NBC. They're coming back. This is a big organization. They're going to pay some good money. They're going to do a tournament. Here, this is going to be your opponent in the tournament. So I'm like, all right, well, this is cool. You got a good little platform, because I never thought I'd be going back to the UFC. My goal was maybe go to Bellator or get in the $1 million PFL tournament or something like that. But finding the XFC, man, they started out taking good care of us, and I won the first fight, moved on to the semifinals, won the second fight, and I was moving on to the finals. And I think the company just went under. I heard a lot of different things about the company. But really what I like to say is it was good while it lasted, because while it lasted, they was treating guys pretty well.
And it gave you a little bit of exposure too, back so they could see how you've been improving. You made that run to the final, so it's like, okay, this guy's putting the work in. I feel like playing those guys in the UFC gave you a little bit of experience. You're able to learn from it. Like, what things did you take from that experience in those three fights to kind of better yourself? To see, oh, I need to improve on this, and I need to work on this a little bit more.
One of the main things was my confidence, knowing that, okay, well, I just fought three basically top 10, top 15 guys in the UFC, and neither one of those guys like whooped me. I lost the fights, don't get me wrong. I did lose the fights, but I was in every single fight, and I think just in my mind, that just showed me I belong, because I don't lose many fights outside the UFC. And the only two fights that I did lose outside the UFC were to two highly talented guys, one being Andre Harrison, who's a former World Series featherweight champion that beat who was at the Lance Palmer, who's pretty damn good himself, and he's been in the finals and in the quarterfinals, semifinals of that $1 million tournament several times, and still has a record of like 20-2, And the other guy that I lost to outside the UFC was Frodo Kaspalayev from Russia, who is like 38-8. The dude's a freaking beast, and he's fought in Bellator before he I think he lost his visa and can't get back. So those are the only two losses outside the UFC. All my other losses are inside the UFC. And whenever I fight all these guys like in the XFC, after I've already been in the UFC getting all that experience, I feel like I just blow through these guys. So I'm like, look, man, I need to fight UFC or somewhere top level, because that's where I belong.
Now you get the call that you're going into season 31 of The Ultimate Fighter. What was that like to get that call, and how did you feel that you were getting that next chance of possibly getting a UFC contract again?
Yeah, so in the middle of all of that, like I said, my eyes were not on the UFC. I never thought that I'd be going back to the UFC. I had a few chances. I dropped the ball on them. I accepted that, and I was more so trying to find a fight somewhere. And after the UFC went under, I was going on almost 2 years before fighting, well, or without fighting, and and I'm thinking, and in my mind, I'm still thinking, PFL, Bellator, something like that. And then my manager hits me up and says, "Hey, bud, sent you an email. I got you an interview for the next Ultimate Fighter. And I'm like, I didn't even know the Ultimate Fighter was coming back out. And I'm like, all right, well, shoot, man. It's going to be tough because, me and my wife, we own two Brazilian mixed martial arts gyms. Um, I got 5 kids. Some of them play sports. They all train jiu-jitsu. And I'm thinking, how can I make this work if I go? And, we sit down, we talked a little bit, and most of my teammates were like, man, don't shoot nothing down. I think you need to see where it goes. If you get on the show, go do it. So same thing. My wife, my kids, they were like, go do it. I'm like, all right, man, well, let's see what happens, and then my manager hit me one day. He says, all right, you're in. And I'm like, damn, I didn't actually think that I would be in there. So it was cool. So getting that call, man, kind of revived me a little bit, motivated me a little bit, knowing that, hey, I have another chance to fight in the UFC. And not only that, I get a chance to win the Contender Series, which was a UFC show, Dana White show, and I can win the Ultimate Fighter too. Like, so yeah, man, I took that chance and ran with it.
They start the show, of course, everybody saw in the very first episode, you had Michael Chandler on one side, you got Conor McGregor on another, and instead of doing the pick a fighter method, which they always did, and they went back and forth, they decided to do, you got the skill guys on one side, you got the prodigies on the other, and they just grouped them all in each division at once. I felt like that was kind of a strange. I thought it would have been better if they would have just did 1v1 and then went back and
Mm-hmm.
forth. And McGregor makes the decision he's going to take all the prospects. And then Chandler, of course, knowing who he is, he's going to take the established guys and work on them. How was it working with Chandler and his group of coaches, especially having Ryan Bader there, who's a champion in Bellator, very established. He's fought in UFC and Bellator, just like Chandler. How was that experience? Because I just see Michael Chandler. I'm like, this guy on the show just seems like a great coach, a positive guy, a guy that you want to go to. Whereas McGregor, very skilled, but he's more of the on camera. Like he seems like he works great with the guys, but it's like I felt like Chandler was more detailed from what they showed on the show.
Yeah. So, we knew nothing. We had no idea. We didn't know who the assistant coaches would be. We didn't know how
Yeah.
they were going to do the picks. We didn't know if the veterans would fight veterans, prospects would fight prospects. We kind of figured it out that it was veterans and prospects while we were down there and we heard some of the rumors. And once they lined us up and said this is how it's going to go, we were like, all right, well, I guess that's cool. It's a little bit different, but and then having Michael Chandler as a coach was one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced. I tip my hat to Michael, man, and to have Coach Jason Strout, Sean Soriano, Ryan Bader, we had Bob Cook, Michael Chandler. That was in my mind like the almighty coaching staff. That was I don't feel like the coaching staff could have got much better than that.
Oh yeah, like you were able to pick their brains. You were able to just anything that you wanted to ask them, they were there at your disposal. Do you still talk to Michael Chandler at all? Do you try and like hit him up and ask him any questions, and then do you still get the chance to do that?
For sure. And I can't forget about Coach Robert Drysdale also, man. Good
Yes.
friend of mine. And I've actually seen him more than everybody because, I go to Vegas quite often for my wife. She competes in the IBJJF tournaments. And we went down there a couple of times. I went down there to hit the PI up. And I've seen Coach every time, Coach Drysdale. But yeah, actually I do. Every now and then I'll hit Mike up just to say what's up. Or, my son was fighting a couple of weeks ago and I'm like, hey, man, look, you want to call my son, give him a little motivation talk like you give us in the house, So it's cool. I talk to Mike quite often. I do plan on getting some training time in with Mike, and hopefully for his, fight with Connor. Hopefully that's still going to happen probably sometime next year.
Yeah.
And it looks like hopefully I'll be fighting sometime next year. You never know. It'd be great to be fighting on the same card. But yeah, I keep in touch with a lot of those guys, man. Just like I keep in touch with a lot of the guys in the Ultimate Fighter house, even the prospects. We're all in a group. for the most part. We all talk quite a bit.
Yeah, it seemed like all the vets bonded very well. They're all about each other. You guys were trained together. Like it seemed like you just had a great bond on the show.
Yeah, I think we kind of did. And of course, some of us veterans that were rooming together, you know, while we're fighting the prospects, we get a little bit closer. But I feel like the UFC did a really good job of loading the house with really good guys for this show. We didn't have those Julian Lanes and Junie Brownings in the show that was going to cause a lot of drama and
Yeah.
keep everybody up at night and rattle everybody. Everybody was there for business and to get better as mixed martial artists and try to fight in the UFC one day.
One of my favorite moments on the show was when they had all the first fights were done. They brought you in with the coaches and, of course, Dana, and he's asking you who you want to fight. And, of course, you said, I'm ranked number 4. I want to fight the guy at the top, Jason Knight. He was like, I'm just shooting my shot now. But, like, I got to fight the best guy there, and that's who it is. And that was just one of my favorite moments because you didn't sugarcoat anything. You were just like, I'm 4, he's 1. I'm going to eventually have to go through him, so I might as well do it now.
Yeah, and the story on that is, I've told people a bunch of times that me and Jason, we only live about an hour and a half apart. He's from right here in Lucedale, Mississippi. I'm
Okay.
about right now 5 to 10 minutes from the North Mississippi line up here. I live in Franklinton, Louisiana, but I see Jason quite often because I'm always bringing my guys to the Biloxi shows to fight,
Yeah.
and a lot of times he's there with some of his guys from his team. So me and Jason, we've been knowing each other for a long time. We've hung out before. So with us being on the show, it's kind of cool because like you got a friend in the house, and we were supposed to fight a long time ago. So with both of us winning our quarterfinal fights, moving to the semifinals, we were like, we're not going to get a better opportunity to fight. We need to fight now. We was Austin Hubbard and Roosevelt. They were a little bit on the bigger side. Me and Jason, which Jason don't diet. He's just a smaller guy. He normally fights 45, but me,
Yeah.
I'm real strict on my weight and I'm dieting, so my weight's kind of low. And so really, I would have rather fight Austin or Roosevelt in the finals whenever I had some time to put a little weight on. So me and Jason, we even said, hey man, look, we need to fight each other. Let's go in there. Let's tell Dana we want to fight each other. Let's go plead this case. So I'm like, let's do it, man. Let's do it. So, yeah, I went in there. I shot my shot for Dana, told him. And I wanted to be the guy that took out both number ones. I did want that because
Yeah.
Lee, when I fought Lee, he was Connor's number 1 guy. And then I'm like, well, I think that'll say a lot if I beat our number 1, I beat their number 1, moving on to the finals. That'll be a cool story. So,
And then that fight didn't disappoint because you guys went crazy. You guys just swung at each other. You guys came at each other. And of course, you came out victorious. I love that fight. It was probably one of my top 2 fights between that one and then the finals fight between that Brad Katona won on the Ultimate
yeah.
Fighter finale. That fight, I think those 2 fights rival each other on this season. But you win that fight, you make the finals, of course, against Austin Hubbard. How was it just channeling everything? Were you nervous going into that fight, knowing that the contract's right there, your second chance at getting into the big time? How was it prepping for him? And was there anything that you saw? Because, of course, the way that you just locked in that hold after it being on the ground and getting hit, it just came out of nowhere. Was there anything that you were able to see in tape or just training that allowed you to just go for it, or was it all just feel and in the moment?
Yeah, not really. I didn't really really work anything specifically. And, I did. I got to train with Austin a good bit in the house. I think we trained a lot together. So, I knew his game. He knew my game. But, but as far as being nervous, I don't think I was nervous, one bit. I was happy to be back there. I was blessed that I got another chance to fight in the UFC. So, I'm back somewhere with nothing to lose, to be honest with you, because I've already lost everything before twice. So, it really, I was just there to have fun. I was there to fight, enjoy every moment of it, no matter what would have happened. And, I figured I can come out, and I just wanted to really try to push the fight as hard as I can. I was going to go out there and fight as hard as I can, and ultimately, you know, found a little opening, got the submission, and got the win.
Yeah, of course. It was a great moment there. I see you winning this season. I compare it to 2 seasons ago when Brian Battle won it because both of you guys were kind of overlooked. No one thought you were going to win. He was the last pick on his season for his team. You were, of course, the number 4 ranked guy on your team, and you guys just outshined everybody. You guys both won the season, and that's where everything grew. Now, after this past week's show, Trevor Peak, of course, won his matchup, and then there was stuff on, of course, social media about you wanting to, of course, fight him in January. Where did all that start? Is there anything in the past on social media that happened between the two of you?
No, not really. But actually, the first time seeing Trevor Peak fight, I was in the Ultimate Fighter house because they
Okay.
bring the TV in and let us watch all the fights. And I remember watching him fight, and just, I mean, I'll say I'm just kind of a fan of his style. I feel like that fight would be a lot like the Jason Knight fight. So I'm like, man, that's somebody that I think will try to stand up. That's somebody that I think I would have a wrestling and jiu-jitsu advantage if the fight hits the mat. And I just like that matchup stylistically. I think it'll be a fun fight. I think that's a fight that could possibly get me a bonus. So, I'm always scoping out the division. My eyes are always open. I'm always sizing these guys up and, trying to see, because right now I don't have a fight on the books. So I'm trying to get a fight on the books. I'm trying to see who would like to fight me. I feel like I should have a little bit of pull in, kind of getting a good matchup, being that I won the Ultimate Fighter. So we'll see what happens. So no word as of yet, but there's a couple guys that I love to fight, and I started out with Tony. I really wanted to fight Tony Ferguson. I mean, not Ferguson, Patty Pimblett, but Patty got matched
Yeah.
with Tony Ferguson. And then I'm like, man, look, I'll fight either one of those. If anybody pulls out, just give me a call. And then I wanted to fight Dan Hooker. I heard nobody would fight Dan Hooker. Now Bobby Green stepped up, and he's going to fight Dan Hooker, I think. So I'm just kind of going down the line, man, trying to find, somebody that wants to fight, somebody that's going to be a good fight and good matchup.
I feel like nowadays in the UFC, they've kind of strayed away from like the normal like full fight camps where guys train for 3 months, then they go into a fight after that, and now it's like you got guys taking fight on 5 days notice, 6 days
Mm-hmm.
notice, couple weeks, and a guy saying that a full fight camp is kind of like a month now. Like, what's your rendition of that? Like, are you a guy that's fine with taking a fight on a week's notice, or do you want to be able to have that full fight camp to train for a guy, or is it just like I'm training all the time, I should be ready for whenever they call?
Yeah, so with me owning 2 gyms and training every night with my students, I got guys that are fighting next week in big shows. So I train a lot of guys. I have a lot of pro fighters too. So I'm consistently training at the least 5 days a week. But you know, I think it all depends. It all depends on who the fight is, what opportunity it is to take a fight on short notice. Of course, I think everybody would like a little time to prepare, and depending on how heavy you are, how much weight you got to cut. So I think you need a little bit of time to, get your mind right, cut that weight down. But if the opponent is right and the opportunity is right, like, I'll take the Patty Pimblett fight on a day notice. I feel like that'll be something really good for me. So I would take that fight short notice. And I mean, there's a lot of fights that I would probably take short notice, but if I had to pick, I would like at least 5-6 week training camp.
Now, you mentioned earlier about being in Las Vegas a few times. I saw on your IG you got to experience a Jelly Roll in concert, and he said how much of a great time that was. How was it able to see a guy like that and being able to meet him?
Oh, that was a highlight, man. That was a highlight of my life. That was one of the coolest things in the world. I'm a big fan of Jelly Roll. My wife's a big fan of Jelly Roll, and actually, Michael Chandler hooked me up with that. I hit Michael because I know he was on Chandler's podcast, and I think they're pretty close friends. So I'm like, hey, Mike, I don't normally ask for favors, but my wife is hounding me to ask for this favor. You think you can hook us up with some jelly roll? And he's like, next thing you know, Jelly Roll texts me, and
Oh
he's
shit.
like, yeah, man, here, VIP backstage, this, that, and I'm like, all right, that's cool, you know. So, yeah, that was a hell of a time out there in Vegas with Jelly Roll, man, and watching him perform. Dude's a beast. You know, I was on my feet the entire time.
Now you mentioned podcast. I saw that you did a podcast with, I believe, friends of yours, redoing the whole season of The Ultimate Fighter. Was
Yep.
that just something like that was your idea? Was it their idea? And then how was that being able to rewatch the season after being on it? Because I know it's one thing to live it, but then it's another thing to relive it on a TV and see it from like different eye like standpoint.
Yeah, so me and a very good friend of mine, his name is David Falcone, we call him Big D. Um, man, huge fight fan. He's actually cornered me in the UFC before, and
Ooh.
we've cornered fights in Bellator together. We've cornered fights in LFA together. So he's a purple belt under me. Been training with me for a long time. Been knowing him for probably longer than I've been training for sure. Because I remember when I first met him, I wasn't even training yet. But we were both fight fans. We were both big fans of the UFC, and we would watch the fights every weekend. And we always talked about doing a podcast, man, because we always feel like we have so much stuff to talk about. You know, we'll start rambling on the phone, and we'll be like, "Man, that could have been a podcast." So after the show, I'm like, "Now's not a better time, man. Let's get it going." So we have another friend of ours, Blake Arledge, that he's done a few things in like studios and stuff like that. So he had some microphones and he had a camera. So we started putting some stuff together, and then next thing you know, we clean out a kitchen at my A Meat gym, and we put as a desk in there, put our microphones, and just started recapping the every week of the Ultimate Fighter, kind of giving inside detail on things that happen. Because who better to give you some inside detail every week than a guy that was on it? So yeah, so we just been having fun, man. We're just doing it for fun, and we're just trying to keep it rolling, making a point to, you know, we covered all 12 weeks of the Ultimate Fighter. We covered the finale of the Ultimate Fighter, and now we're trying to cover, a lot of the pay-per-view shows, the good fight night shows, and just a bunch of friends having fun. We'll drink a beer every now and then on the show and just talk whatever is a hot topic.
What do you think about the news that just came out that John Jones tore a tendon in his shoulder and is out 8 months? So now instead of him and Stipe, it's going to be Sergey Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall. And the rumors that they were holding that off because both Stipe and John were going to retire. How do you feel about all that?
Yeah, so that goes to tell you, man. Now you may never get to see that fight with Stipe and Jones. I know they said he'll probably be out like 8 months. So
Yeah.
that's a long time, man. That's a long time, especially. But if anybody can come back, it's going to be John Jones. But is he going to want to come back? That's going to be the question, And you got Sergey and Aspinall. That's your next two top guys to fight for the title. I think that's going to be a good fight, but it's not going to be the Stipe and John Jones fight. So, I think that card kind of takes a little bit of a hit, but what you gonna do, man? That's the sport.
Yeah, like I was rooting for either one. I felt like they were holding that because they wanted to figure out who the next guy was going to be. But if they were going to have something to like an alternate, this would be a really good alternate fight. It's just like you said, it's just not as star studded as Jones, Stipe, two champions in their own right with a lot of pedigree. I'm hoping that you get to that point once you get started with your career. Like, what's your outline looking like for your UFC stint this time around? Are you looking to fight as much as possible? Are you gonna nitpick? What's your strategy when it comes to getting fights?
You know, uh, really want to be smart about it. I'm not gonna nitpick. I'm not gonna be picky about who the UFC gives me, but I want to fight guys that are a little more known. I feel like, you know, I've been in the UFC in and out the UFC for a long time. Making my debut back in 2013. So, I was in the UFC longer or before a lot of the guys that's on the roster now. So I feel like I should have a little bit of, you know, pull and push to be able to fight somebody with a little bit of a name. You know, of course, probably not going to fight nobody in the top 10, top 15, but, you know, I would like to fight some guys like Patty Pimblett. Um, you know, I would have fought even Bobby Green. Um, man, Jordan Lovett. Right now, I'm Trevor Peak. You know, guys that are the UFC are maybe pushing a little bit, but just not that top 10 or top 15. Now, I would gladly fight a top 10, top 15. I would love that, but just not sure who the UFC is going to give me yet. But like I said, I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to just be like, hey, I'm going to fight every weekend, you know. Want to be smart about it this time. I feel like I definitely got the tools. I got the experience. I feel like I can make a run and be able to throw a number beside my name, being that top 10, top 15. It's just got to have the right fights, man, and the right matchups.
And we've seen in the last couple of years that the UFC don't shy away from giving everybody on the Ultimate Fighter opportunities. We've seen a lot of guys in that haven't won the show that make their debut, get that experience. Of course, we got Brian Battles fought 6 times already. Petrosky, who just has fought 7 times. Michael Gilmore a couple of times. You've seen guys just get that opportunity. Muhammad Usman just fought a couple weeks ago. They want to get you guys in there and get you guys. And I feel like your stock is up right now. Do you feel the same way? Because I feel like everybody is recognizing you more after winning the show. And then I think that's just a bonus for the UFC because as the winner, they want you to have that recognition. They want you to be booked. And I feel like you feel the same way. Like you just said, you want to get a fight as soon as you can. You want to get in there so you can kind of get the jitters out and you'll fight anybody. And I know that you're gonna come in and you're gonna wreak havoc. I feel like from what I've seen on the regional scene, watching your tape to the Ultimate Fighter, I feel like you're more of a complete fighter than you were in the past.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I definitely believe that. And like you said, I believe my stock is up right now. So I feel like that's good enough to get me a decent sized fight, you know, either, you know, top prelim on a pay per view card like we was last time, or even maybe on a main card on a fight night or something. But like I said, man, I ain't picky. I after you know doing this show, then having to watch the show, fight the finale, and all that stuff. You know, I kind of wanted to take a few months off just to hang out with family, work with some of the guys from my gym, not have to worry about myself. But I feel like now it's time to, you know, get back to work. You know, I was pushing for that fight with Patty in December. Probably not going to happen or anything like that, but you know, I'm definitely looking for January right now. So I've talked to my managers a little bit. Like I said, I'm calling out guys, trying to shoot my shot. You know, trying to be vocal, trying to be relevant. So hopefully, UFC will match me up with somebody in January.
Well, Kurt, I thank you so much for coming on the Cage Sessions. The way that we end the show is we give you the floor. If you want to shout anybody out, say anything you want, the floor is yours.
Yeah, man. First off, thanks for having me on. You know, shout out to my team, Grace United, Team Jukow. Know those guys. Um, where we're building. Got a lot of guys. Got a lot of guys support me. All my friends, family. Um, my podcast, The Contender and the Pretenders. You know, we're, you know, check it out. See what you think. You know, but yeah, follow me on Instagram at Kurt Holobaugh.
You heard it there. Follow him on Instagram. He's waiting for his first fight, so keep an eye out for Kurt Holobaugh in the UFC. Once again, thank you so much. And we'll see you guys next time on another edition of the Cage Sessions. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.